What happened was that Universal had a book about this case. It was the Wiley Hoffert case. And it became quite famous because one of the girls that was murdered was the niece of the famous writer, Philip Wiley. And they gave it to me saying, well, here's an interesting story. You know, the detectives and everybody got together and found out who killed these two girls. And I went to interview the guy who was accused. I just didn't buy it. And then I eventually got to talk to the man I named as Kojack. And he told me it's all phony. What happened is, and it happens so often, they picked the wrong person and then they stuck with it. You know, they try to make it work. And what I began to understand is that when I had talked to Martin Luther King about what our justice system was like, and you know, he went to jail for some times, and he says, you can't reform it unless you reform our whole society. Now, the cliche thing is that, well, police are involved, bad apples. But here there wasn't only the police. There was the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. And, you know, you find these things so often. Like in Chicago, it was a nest of corruption. Not only the cops, judges, a lot of people involved. So that was the case. And
Now, had you already started writing the teleplay and then had to rewrite it when you
no,
discovered?
no, I never wrote it. I wanted to find out the truth. It began to seem to be very suspicious from the little I got into it at first. I didn't realize that the corruption was as large as it was. And what happened was that he was also accused, this young black man, of accosting a Puerto Rican woman in attempted rape. And what happened was that Kojack really knew the real murderer. He had got him out of jail before. They were friends. And he confessed to him that he was the real murderer. And eventually he was freed. And I paid for Kojack and another guy to go to Puerto Rico and talk to the woman. She says she looked at the lineup. She wasn't sure. They persuaded her. And it was incredible. And I began to understand what King meant when he said, if you're going to reform prisons, you gotta reform our whole society. I had terrific confrontations with the Brooklyn District Attorney, shouting matches. And eventually, Universal was afraid to do it. They liked it. But that was the point in television, a very important point, that the only thing you could do was not only treat cops as heroes, you had to treat them near saints. You know, at the time of Dragnet, all we want is a fact, man. And so they were scared as hell. I had only one advocate, and that was an actor by the name of Marlon Brando. He wanted to do it for the very reason that they were scared of it, you know, to show cops and the society as it really was. And they said, you're nuts, you know, he's yesterday's news and he's a lot of trouble. Then what happened was there was a new head of television at Universal, Sid Sheinberg. I'd originally intended to do it as a feature, but they turned it down. And he found it intriguing, and he gave it to a very courageous guy at that time. It was head of CBS, Fred Silverman. And so they do it, and I talked Brando into doing the series, and I came to them, and they turned him down even for a series. This was just before The Godfather, you know. And I'll never forget, it was so poignant. He called me up and he said, I tried to give him all kinds of reasons. He said, Zabby, don't they want me? And The Godfather came after that shortly, and he became the most sought-after actor in the business, you know. And the young man who had been accused of the murder was the best man at my wedding. And outside of knowing the breadth of the corruption, it was a very happy experience.